Welcome to Wise Minds, Wild Hearts, the podcast for heart-led high achievers just like you, ready to take inspired action and achieve true alignment. If you're craving deeper influence, greater impact, and a life that genuinely lights you up, you're in the right place. I'm Kip Clark, former academic turned entrepreneur, transformational coach, elite athlete, and shameless fountain pen addict. Here, you'll learn how to leverage the beautiful wisdom of your years with the wild passion that drives you forward. Together, we'll break through those limiting beliefs, unlock the power of your subconscious mind, and create a life that aligns with your soul's desire. Ready to create the kind of impact you've always dreamed of? Let's do this. Let's face it, change can be hard, really hard. There can be a lot of uncertainty around change. And if that's how you're feeling right now, be sure to check out episode 25 because I talk about uncertainty in that one. But often making a change in one area of our life requires changes in other areas as well, and that can lead to our feeling overwhelmed. And then there's our old familiar friend, comfort, who just wants everything to stay exactly as it is. I mean, why put ourselves out there when there's so much at risk potentially? Well, the best answer to that is that there's so much more to be gained. And frankly, if we're not changing and growing, we're decaying and dying. So I know which one is more appealing to me. So today I want to dive into the third stage of change. So this is a continuation from episode 24, in which I looked at the first two stages of change. So today I'm going to look at stage 3, which is the preparation stage, and stage 4, the action stage. And these are based on James Prochaska's book called Changing for Good. And these two stages that I'm going to talk about today, they're really pivotal because people will either build momentum here or they'll start to self-sabotage without realizing it. And what's really fascinating about these two stages is that they're not as straightforward as they seem. So the preparation stage can kind of be a sneaky place where a lot of hidden resistance will show up in full force, making us feel like we're finally moving forward when in reality we're just kind of spinning in circles. And then the action stage, this is the moment where things are supposed to start happening for us, that can become a trap of just busy work where there's effort being put in, but really not necessarily effort that's creating meaningful change or progress. So today I'm going to break it all down. I'm going to talk about what the stages look like and how to navigate them successfully and how to support others through them if that's a role that you have. So whether you're working through a personal transformation or you're coaching someone else through theirs, this episode will give you the tools to recognize some of the hidden pitfalls of change in these two phases and, more importantly, how to move past them. So let's get started here. Preparation, stage 3. This is where resistance and ambivalence can show up. This is where they'll start to show up here. So the preparation stage, here the person has mentally committed to change and is getting ready to take action. But this is what most people don't realize. This is also the stage where the deepest internal resistance can start to surface. Why? Well, because up until now, change has been mostly theoretical. We've been turning it over in our minds and maybe we've been visualizing it, but now it's starting to get real. And real means risk in this context for some people. So until now, the change was something that was so far out in the future, it wasn't really powerful enough, I suppose, for us to start feeling this resistance. But as soon as that change moves up in terms of time, so now we're actually going to get started maybe in a couple of days, maybe next week, maybe within a month, that's usually the timeline has shrunk down that much. So it's really just around the corner. And so common resistance patterns that will show up in this stage include paralysis by analysis. So this is where we can feel overwhelmed by too many possible starting points, for example. Or we might get into a mode of just constantly over-researching, over-preparing instead of getting into action. This is one, I confess, this is one that can be guilty of. I I could do research all day long. I love it. It's part of my former self as an academic, where research was a regular thing for me. And so it can be a default state. And if I'm not careful, I can just fall into that mode of doing a little more research, a little more, a little more, a little more, as a way of keeping myself from getting into genuine action. Another resistance pattern can be perfectionism at this point, and it's also a tactic for stalling. So this happens when we think, I've got to have everything perfectly lined up here before I take action. I've got to have everything in place first, and then I'm going to take action. But we never really do get everything perfectly lined up. Second guessing can show up at this point. So suddenly questioning whether the change is actually necessary at all, even though we were previously certain of it. When that action phase seemed far off in the future, we could stay satisfied that our vision is good and we'll make progress when the time comes. But now, again, the action stage is imminent. It's almost upon us. So our minds can go into overdrive, finding all kinds of apparent flaws in our vision because it's all becoming real now. And usually what's happening here is that our ego has awakened and is desperately trying to keep us playing small. So it's going to throw endless faulty reasons for why you should delay taking action. And then we can also, at this point, look for an easier way out. We can get distracted by quick fixes or even some kind of sidebar project that suddenly seems so much more important than our original vision. We'll find ways to bail out instead of committing to the long-term change we know deep down is necessary. So some of us can get stuck in this stage indefinitely, in this preparation stage of just endlessly getting things lined up, but never quite moving forward. And then other people might make the opposite mistake here. They can rush to the action phase too quickly, skipping some of the essential groundwork and jumping straight into unprepared action, only to hit major roadblocks later. Now, if you're a coach or a leader and your role is to help others navigate change, you can be helpful in a few ways. You can help that person clarify his or her first step, not necessarily the entire plan, just the next best step. You can also help the person recognize and name the resistance because it's unique to each of us. So the ways that you experience resistance when you're contemplating change is not the same as the way I experience it, and it's not the same as the way others experience it. So recognize it, help to shine a light on it, help the person see it for what it is. Instead of letting that resistance run the show, you allow this person that you're helping to get back into feeling as though he or she is in control of things again. And you can also help create structure so that this phase doesn't get cut short or the person doesn't stay stuck in it forever. Now, stage 4, the action stage. And in this stage, similar to preparation, but this is really where we need to be careful that busyness isn't substituting for genuine progress. So once we move into the action stage, we are now actively working towards making the change, but not all action is progress. So motion doesn't necessarily equate to forward momentum, or activity doesn't necessarily equate to achievement here. Some of the common pitfalls of the action stage, again, can be doing that busy work instead of the meaningful work that moves the needle. For me, again, I can do things like answering emails, doing a little more research, maybe interacting on social media, and these are all things that can make me feel like I'm busy, I'm doing something. Here I am, at my desk, at my computer, but really they're not making genuine progress, and they might actually be hindering my progress. In the action stage, we can also fall prey to inconsistent effort. So it's like showing up some days and going all in, and then other days not feeling like it. So just saying, I'm not going to do so much today, or maybe even just avoiding taking action altogether. So it's a kind of on again, off again approach. Now, I get it that our energy stores can change from one day to the next, but even on those days when our energy is low, we can still be making forward momentum, making forward progress, as long as we're still firmly connected to our commitment to that change we want to make. So if you feel that your energy today is only at about, let's say, 60% of normal, just commit to giving 100% of that. It's still progress. You can still feel good at the end of the day about what you've accomplished. And then another pitfall in this phase is burnout from unsustainable action. So this happens if we go too hard too fast, only to crash and burn down the road. So distance runners learn a very valuable lesson, often the hard way, about managing their energy at the start of a race. So if they come out of the gates too fast for the first quarter or the first third of the marathon, they're going to hit a wall and they'll end up with a really poor result at the end, or they might get a DNF designation, a did not finish. So in short, action isn't just about movement, it's about movement in the right direction. Now, if you're a coach or a leader and your role is to help people, you can help them differentiate between the meaningful action and that just sort of busy work. So here's where your own wisdom and experience can play a role. What were the times when you found yourself engaged in just busy work that wasn't really moving the needle? How were you able to recognize it? And what did you do to get out of it? So sharing your experience with someone else can help that person identify maybe some similar patterns there. Because ideally, you want the person to zero in on that 20% of efforts that are creating 80% of the person's outcomes. That's that Pareto principle. That's the powerful part of the Pareto principle. You might also help people track their progress in ways that will reinforce momentum. So this might be like having a daily win log where even small progress is noted. It might also be helping the person break down the big goal into smaller, more readily actionable steps. And you can also help the person build consistency over intensity. So instead of going all in and burning out, I mean, we love the enthusiasm and maybe the person's able to sustain that high level of intensity, but maybe just saying, hey, just be careful here. We could burn out. You might end up hitting a wall. So maybe scale this back a little bit. Sustainable change is usually more about small intentional steps done consistently day in and day out, rather than big bursts of energy and then periods where we've got to take a time out because we've exhausted ourselves. Now, how do we actually navigate these two stages successfully? So in the preparation stage, that's the stage 3, many of us can still have a foot in both worlds. So we know change is necessary, and there's a part of us that wants it, but we might also feel a lot of fear about letting go of the old identity, the old way of doing things, our comfort zone. So clarity and commitment are really important here. If you're working through change yourself, well, start by choosing one specific starting point. So instead of getting lost in options, pick the most viable first step or the one that seems most obvious and commit to that. You can always change it later if you need to. And by the way, this is what all successful people do. But getting out of uncertainty and indecision is the key here. Secondly, name your resistance. What is it? Saying to yourself, what is it I'm actually afraid of here? What's the worst case scenario? Often if we just talk it out or write it out, it'll reduce its power over us, and that can help you set that aside. And then you can decide what good enough looks like. Perfection isn't required here. Progress is. And listen, I get it. I have a very high standard of excellence for myself. I've had times in my life where, looking back, I could see that perfectionism was running the show, but it never really served me. So I've learned through my many decades that perfection doesn't actually exist in any meaningful way, and excellence can take many forms. I can do something with excellence even on a very small scale, and that will lead to sustainable progress. Now, if you're coaching others, Challenge any assumptions they might have about readiness. Most people never feel 100% ready before they start something, and that's okay. Lots of people feel decidedly unready, but they take action anyway because they know that's the quickest way for them to get out of those really sticky, stuck feelings and just start making things happen. Encourage a bias toward action. So definitely there's a time for preparing and making sure you've got a solid foundation, but you cannot stay in that stage too long. You've got to get into action. So help the people build genuine momentum with small daily wins. And you can do that also through some kind of accountability factor. So it might be regular check-ins, it might be a progress tracker of some kind. Just keeping people accountable helps them keep moving. Now, thriving in the action stage, well, this can be sometimes a challenge when the initial excitement wears off. So we can be full of excited energy and lots of forward momentum when we start, but then we can reach a point where that thrilling start starts to feel more like effort. This is where discipline will come into play here. So if you're finding your motivation is waning, it can often be because you've lost your connection to that future vision. So you need to take a moment and reconnect with it. Does it need to shift a little bit? Have you come upon some new knowledge or understanding that means your future vision needs a slight tweak or a change? By all means, go ahead and change it. But just make sure that you're still moving forward, tracking those micro wins. Progress is cumulative. And then reframing setbacks as learning, not failure. I've talked about this often in previous episodes. Every mistake, every stumble, everything that might feel like a failure is providing data. So instead of allowing that to stop you, just wait a moment, take a look at it, find the learning in it, make the adjustments, and then keep going. If you're helping others, check in again. Are they making progress? Are they just doing busy work? Normalize the setbacks for them. People will stumble. It's part of growth, and let that be okay. So create an environment in which people feel that they can take chances. I mean, they're calculated risks. They're not foolish risks. But there's always incredible learning available in the setbacks. So help them mine them for the gold that they contain. And then teaching resilience again. So progress often can look like, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere right now. And then suddenly I am. So growth can be accompanied by feelings of genuine discomfort. But just like the setbacks, this is normal and it's not something to avoid. So I'm curious to know, where are you? If you're contemplating change or you feel like you're in the middle of change, where are you in the cycle? I've talked about the first 4 stages. Hopefully it's not pre-contemplation, because that's the stage where we think, nope, nothing needs changing. I'm fine. Just, leave me alone here. Hopefully you're at least in the contemplation stage, if not in preparation or action. And then if you're a coach or leader, helping those you lead understand what stage they're in, understand what the pitfalls are, and understanding how they can get through them when they show up. So I hope this has been helpful to you. And in the 3rd and final episode of this series, I'm going to talk about the 5th and 6th stages of change, and I add my own little twist on how you can make the most of them. And now, if you have identified that you're in either the contemplation or preparation stage, maybe even the action stage, and you'd like a little more help to zero in on just those habits and the people or the environmental factors that will really help you make the change you envision for yourself, feel free to download my Energy Audit Playbook. You'll find a link for it in the show notes. It's free. It's a really powerful tool, and I think it can be really helpful to you. All right, my friends, that's it for this episode. If this has been helpful to you, let me know. I love to hear about all the positive changes you're making in your life. And if there's someone you know who might benefit from hearing this message, please share the love, my friend. See you next time on Wise Minds, Wild Hearts.